Hello, this is Mr. Torres. Let's start our review of the skill that we learned this week. The skill that we learned this week, that we are learning this week, is analyzing point of view. Let's start. So the first thing that we have to define is perspective, or the voice from which the story is told. What is the perspective? The perspective is the angle or direction in which a person looks at an object. Look at this object on the ground. One gentleman is looking at a 6 and he's telling that he's looking at a 6. The other gentleman is telling, I see a 9. And he's also right. So from the direction that they're looking, this same object, they have different perspectives or different voices or sides of the story. Now let's go with point of view. There are three main points of view. The narrator is the one who's telling the story. In all the stories, we have a narrator that tells the story. It can be a character in the story, but it doesn't have to be. The point of view can affect many other aspects of the story's plots, and how appealing the story is to the reader. How and why. How can we tell which point of view is being used? We have to ask three questions. I suggest that you write this down in your journal. Number one, which pronoun, I, he, she, does the narrator use? Make sure that you look at the pronouns and the narration, not the dialogue. The dialogue are what the character says, character speech that is always in quotation marks. Number two, is the narrator a character in the story? If the narrator is a character in the story, it's an important question that is going to help us solve this out. And number three, what does the narrator know? What is the narrator sharing with the reader? Does the narrator know what another characters are thinking or feeling? That is going to be a really big clue, but we need to pay a lot of attention to find out. So let's start with first person point of view. The narrator is going to use pronouns such as I, me, mine, we during the narration. The narrator is going to be a character on the story. Actually, the narrator is going to tell us his story. The narrator can express his or her feelings and thoughts. But as we humans, we cannot reveal what other people feel or know because we don't know. So the narrator can only express their feelings. Another thing, the stories from this perspective can sometimes sound like journal entries. Exactly. So the narrators are the first person point of view. The narrator is going to pretty much tell us what happened to him. And it can sound like if he wrote it in his own journal. This point of view is commonly preferred. Yes. Why? Because it's really easy to write a personal narrative. We do it all the time. When we talk to our friends, telling them how we went with our parents to the movies or how it was at park yesterday, that is, you're going to tell that story from a first person point of view. This point of view is not always reliable. Yes. And why? If you remember the picture that we saw a couple of minutes ago, this is why it's not always reliable, because you're going to have your own perspective and you are only going to be able to see either a 6 or a 9. Well, that is the first person point of view. So everything is going to be about me, me, me. Here's an example from a book that I like a lot. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you can say that. You could say that. If you notice here, Percy Jackson started by stating his name. My name is Percy Jackson. I am 12 years old. I was a boarding student. Am I a troubled kid? So he's telling us that he's going to tell us the story from the first person point of view. Let's continue. Second person point of view. The narrator uses the pronoun you and puts the reader directly into the story. It is often used for instruction or direction. This point of view is almost never used in literature. Why? Because it's really hard to tell a story about you, the reader. The reader, we cannot tell about a story about you. That couldn't happen. So let's continue. Second person point of view example. This example, the one of Percy Jackson, uses also the pronoun you. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. Wait a minute, there's a use of you, of the pronoun you. Let's break it down. Percy does talk to the reader sometimes, but he is the one that is telling the story. He is going to tell us his story. The story is about himself, not about us. Percy, in the book of Percy Jackson, they're trying to bring the reader closer to the book, so we develop feelings toward Mr. Percy Jackson. Okay, let's go and look at the third person point of view. The narrator uses pronouns such as he, she, it, they, and them often. The narrator is not a character in the story. This point of view is the most common. There are three types of third person point of view. The first one is going to be objective. Second one is going to be limited. And the third one is going to be omniscient. In this diagram, you can see that the narrator is an N. The character are going to be the C's. The story is a big circle. And the arrow represents the feelings, thoughts, and all the information that the narrator has about those characters. Okay, let's start here. Third person point of view, objective. A third person objective narrator only narrates characters, actions, and dialogue. If you have seen the program of Hidden Camera, you know what I'm talking about. It's comparable to a hidden camera, what a hidden camera could record. The narrator cannot reveal any of the character's thoughts or feelings. He does not know. And the third person objective narration requires that the reader infer characters' thoughts and feelings based on their actions and dialogues. In here you can see the diagram. The narrator doesn't know a lot. Let's continue with limited. Third-person point of view, limited. The third-person limited narrator narrates characters' actions and dialogues, but also offers the reader the thoughts and feelings of one character, usually the main character. This can sometimes be confused with first-person narration. Why? Because the reader can think that the narrator is the one in the story and he's telling his story, but no, the narrator is going to use pronouns such as he, she, it, and not me or I. Lastly, third person point of view, the narrator is omniscient because it's all knowing. It knows everything about all or most of the characters. Omni means all of all things, scient, knowing. So the third person narrator can inform the reader of the thoughts and feelings of most of the other characters. He can tell pretty much everything about each character. And that's all we have for today. Okay, another good thing that I forgot to tell you is the pronoun case. This table probably is good for you to write down. So in the first person, the pronouns are going to be me, I, me, my, mine, we, us, ours. In the second person is you, your, and the third person he, she, her, they, them, also the characters' names. I suggest that you rewatch this video several times and make notes. Bye for now.